Hey guys, DT House from Augusta, Georgia. And before you start thinking there's something wrong with your internet connection, there's not. I'm currently standing in a room with no windows and no light. And I wanted to ask you a question. How many of you, when you were younger, were afraid of the dark? Maybe you are afraid of the dark now. I think if we're all honest, we don't love being in pitch black darkness. That's why we have lights, exterior lights everywhere. We have phones that have flashlights and keychains that have flashlights. We don't like being in the dark. But why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but I think one of those reasons is that darkness equals fear. We can't see what's going on around us, and quite frankly, we're afraid. We don't know what's coming next. We don't have a path forward. It seems as though we're wandering aimlessly. And yet, it's interesting that in a pitch black room where you can't see your hand in front of your face, the smallest amount of light can bring hope, can bring a path forward, can bring peace, and can lead to a life of joy. Today we're looking at the I am statement of Jesus, where Jesus says, I am the light of the world. All right, there we are. That's better. You know, today if you walk into a room, all you have to do is flip a switch, and voila, there's light. In fact, most of us live in places where, due to exterior illumination, street lights, signs, things like that, we actually have to work really hard to catch a glimpse of the stars, because the light shines and it drowns out the darkness of the night sky. Well, in Jesus' day, light would have been more scarce. They didn't have all the technology that we have, and so Jesus' hearers of this passage, when he says this, would have been very familiar with darkness. In two different places in John's gospel, Jesus makes the definitive statement, I am the light of the world. And one of those is right here in John chapter 9. I'm going to read the first 7 verses for you. It's talking about Jesus, and it says this, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming, when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed, and he came back seeing. Now there's a lot going on here in this passage. I mean, Jesus literally heals this man who's been born blind, born in darkness. His whole life has been one of disorienting places because he hasn't ever seen. And there's a lot going on. Jesus spits in the dirt and makes mud, and he rubs it on this man's face and on his eyes, and he tells him to go wash and be healed, and he is healed. And for the first time in his life, he sees. So there's so much going on, but I want to draw your attention to two different things. And the first is this. So when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, he's indirectly saying that the world is in darkness. Now this would have struck a chord with the people that were hearing that, because they were familiar with darkness. They would have thought about what the darkness brings. The fear, the terror, the evil, the disorientation. The world, Jesus says, is in darkness. The world is disorienting. That's the first thing he's saying. The second thing that Jesus says in saying that I am the light of the world, it's a definitive statement where Jesus is saying, I am the ultimate source, the only source of all wisdom and all truth and life. And as he's doing this, he's drawing a clear line back to the Old Testament. And it's not as clear back to Moses right here, but what it is clear back to is in the creation. It all does go back to Moses, as the guys said yesterday and the day before. Steve and Todd, I encourage you to go back and watch those videos, but he's drawing a clear line back to the Old Testament. And you think about creation. And Genesis 1 says that earth was formless and void. It was darkness. But then God said, let there be light. And there was light. And the darkness is gone. The darkness has been dispelled. You know, Jesus here is saying that, again, as he has said earlier, the I am statements is pointing to the fact that he is God, that he was there with God at creation, creating. And as I mentioned, this darkness to light is a theme in John's gospel. And if you go to the first verses of John, in John chapter 1, specifically looking at verse 4 and 5, John says this, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And that's good news for us today, friends. Because apart from Christ, we're in darkness. We're hopeless. We're scared. We're disoriented. We live in sin. We live in fear. But enters Jesus, enters the light. He brings life. And he brings hope. He brings peace. And he brings life here and eternal life. Because he is the light. And isn't it wonderful that Jesus says that the darkness has not overcome it? That this is not light that can be put out, that Christ's light shines brighter than any light in the world. And that there's no coronavirus, there's no cancer, there's no bully. I don't know what dark situations are going on in your heart, in your life, but as a follower of Christ, you can have hope that Jesus is light. And about walking with him, with trusting him with the things that are going on in our lives, we can know that he is our ultimate source of strength and our ultimate source of guidance. So glad you guys tuned in today. Make sure you check out the Bible study. Spend some time reading over these verses and answering those questions. We'll see you again soon.